Good afternoon and welcome to the Way to Wow show. My guest today is a very, very long-standing friend of mine, Steve Bram. And before I introduce Steve, I do want to take a minute to remind you about last week's show. So my guest last week was Greg Ward, who had a very interesting story to tell of having started out on the Wicked stage, as those of us who are Broadway aficionados sometimes refer to it. He was an actor, and eventually he was hired by the New York Police Department to help them train their officers to better deal with citizens, especially the kind of diverse citizenry that the city of New York has. And he was tremendously successful doing that. And he went on to found the Center for Respectful Leadership, which is what he pursues to this day. So for those of you who may be in the acting world and are trying to figure out, am I ever going to be able to do anything with this? I can't encourage you highly enough to watch last week's show. Just go to our YouTube channel, The Way to Wow Show, and take a look at it. If you have any thoughts or comments, Greg's contact information is there, as is mine. We'd be happy to hear from you. Today, it's a real treat to have Steve Bram on the show. And also his lovely bride is joining us, I see. I actually knew Julie before I knew Steve. We taught Sunday school together longer ago than any of us are going to want to admit.
That is true.
It is, right? A good old university synagogue. So, Julie, I don't know if Steve showed you this, but I think, a month or two ago, I sent him a copy of the school newspaper that announced your engagement to Steve. So see, even then we were diligent reporters of the important things that were going on. So
amazing. That's great.
Yeah, it's great to be with longstanding friends. So just a real brief biography on you, Steve. And anyone who is in the real estate business in Los Angeles knows Steve Bram. He is one of the co-founders, and he's the principal at George Smith Partners Incorporated, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, the biggest real estate finance arranger on the West Coast. Is that?
Well, no, we were and are the largest independently owned commercial mortgage brokerage company on the West Coast. So you're right. So there are a couple of large, I want to call them chains, that have offices in New York, have offices in Texas and Chicago and other places. But in LA, we are the largest independently owned mortgage brokerage company. Mortgage brokerage being that we broker or arrange complex commercial financing transactions. That's what we do. And our biggest years were $4 billion a year. Most years we do $2.5 to $3.5 billion a year of loans we arrange.
And about a couple hundred transactions a year, as I recall.
Correct.
From your website.
Exactly. Yeah. 200 or so.
And I will speak as having been involved in the real estate business here in LA for most of my professional life, at least my civilian professional life. George Smith is known for the kind of attention to the individual needs of the people that they work with. And that's really, I think, what has made the difference in that business. And also, so back in the days before I joined the Navy, even though Steve was, heading up this huge company, he would always take the time to come and speak to the students I was teaching at UCLA Extension, who were, for the most part, brand new to the real estate business, and didn't know a whole lot. and he came and shared his time, taking it away from his family because the classes were in the evening. So, Julie, you'll have to know, I always felt a little bit guilty about that, but presumably you understood. And to, for Steve to give of his time to people who were new to the business, it was really a wonderful thing for them to be able to talk to someone who was both so successful and so knowledgeable, and just sit down with them and have a conversation and really help them launch their careers in a very powerful way. So Steve, thank you very, very much for coming on the show.
Well, you're welcome. It's glad to be here. And maybe out in your podcast listening group, your audience are some people that are thinking to get into the real estate business or the finance business, and some things that we talked about today can shed some light to help them figure out their path in life and figure out if it's something they like. And that's my goal. And that's my goal in doing this and speaking in classes at UCLA and USC and other schools as well.
Well, that's terrific. So, I want to start as far back in your thinking about a professional life as you're willing to go. Some of my guests will even talk about kind of what they were thinking they might do when they were a kid, and then we sort of trace their story up from there. I didn't know you when you were a child or a teenager. We were already kind of young men when we met. But would you care to share some thoughts from kind of the days?
I would say that if somebody's trying to think of what kind of career they're good at, what kind of business they should go into, and if the business that I'm in is a business that's good for them, there are some skill sets that one should think about that one needs to succeed in the business that we're in. One is that you have to be good at sales, and sales means being able to emit trust, being able to get people comfortable that you know what you're doing and they should be comfortable to entrust. In the business we're in, oftentimes they're entrusting one of their most important assets to us at the time where everything's done except the financing and everything can go wrong. Example might be if someone's going to build a project and they've been working on it for 4 or 5 years to buy the land, get it zoned and entitled, designed, and now they need that construction loan, that mezzanine financing, that equity. And they're thinking they've got 4, 5, 6 months to get it done. And gee, if you screw up, then they're screwed. Or if they're buying an asset and they put $500,000 in escrow and they've got 3 months to close and they're trusting you to get it done. And we tend to say to them, one of the things that we pitch is you can sleep at night because we don't. And the idea being that when a customer gives us an exclusive to represent them, they've now handed over control of this very important part of their business process to us. And we're not sleeping at night because we're uptight that we have to get it done. And it's an awesome responsibility in their business, what we're doing. Obviously, in the world, it's just another deal. But in their business world, it's a big deal for them, and they've handed it over to us, and we've said, trust us, we'll get back to you when we've got questions or an answer. But let me go back to your question about, is this a business? What's this business about? This business is about sales. We call it technical sales. When you sit down with someone, you're not trying to sell them a used car. You're not trying to convince them that you're the best just because you're the best. You're trying to convince them that you're the best because you understand the technical aspects of the finance business, which is a very complex business. Underwriting real estate is complex. Knowing lenders and their programs is complex. And knowing what a customer wants and what fits them is complex. So that's technical sales, I'd say. And that's really what our business is about, having a very deep bench of skill set. When did I think I wanted to do this? As a kid, I was always good at math. You've got to be good at math to do this business. You've got to be good at numbers. Real estate is the core of what we do. So you have to understand real estate and like it. I'd say that my dad was in the real estate development business. And so I was around that as a kid. My granddad was in the real estate development business. I was around that as a kid. And I'll say that when I was younger, I thought I wanted to be in the operations business. I wanted to be someone who operated hotels, wanted to be somebody who operated different things because it was fun. And there's nothing wrong with doing something that's fun and doing something that you enjoy. But over time, in high school, college and high school, I determined, and I think I took the lessons from my dad, who was in the development business and the brokerage business, that if you can find a career where you're not paid for your time, you're paid for your expertise. And that could mean being in the real estate business where you own something where once you put the deal together, it cash flows. And gee, you can sit on the beach and the cash comes in. That's a good business to be in. Or you're in the brokerage business where if you're smart, you put people together, you structure a deal that the other guy couldn't do, and you get a fee that's certainly on an hourly basis, far in excess of what you could get working on an hourly basis or on some sort of base pay. So at some point, you decide that you want to take the risk. You're not going to get paid for your time. You're going to get paid for your smarts and how you can put deals together, whether it be brokerage or development or ownership. And I kind of developed that not when I was 12 years old, but when I was 18, 19, 20 years old.
So you went to college. I mean, when you were figuring out your course of study at college, how did you fit that around, wanting to be in real estate? Because
so I will.
There weren't real estate development programs and such. Those are
So,
relative.
so I'm going to first apply what I had just said to you to my personal experience. When I was in high school and junior high school, I was very involved in school activities. I was president of my graduating class in high school with 900 kids in the class. I ran the food stands, I ran all the food concessions at the high school where I went for 3 years. And I said, gee, operating food and beverage businesses is kind of fun. And I like it. I'm good at that. So I ultimately decided to go to hotel school. And I graduated, went to Cornell Hotel School. I did Claremont McKenna College, at the time called Claremont Men's College, for 2 years, and got a pretty deep background in finance and business for 2 years, politics as well. But then I transferred to Cornell Hotel School for my last 2 years and got a business background in running hotels, thinking I'm going to want to run and operate hotels. And then I worked in the hotel business for a few years and quickly learned that it's a hard business to be in. The hours are long, the pay is low, and the upside is not great. Mm-hmm. And I said, kind of a little bit on the side, I said, well, I like being around the hotel business. It's fun, but instead of being able to get a free hotel room because I work there, I'd like to get a free hotel room because I own the hotels. Mm-hmm. So I said, I'm not going to be in hotel operations anymore. I'm thinking I want to own hotels instead. So I kind of got into the finance business, went to Wharton for business school. It's a finance school. And when I went in there, I was thinking I was going to just improve my business finance background so that I could own hotels. Mm. And during my business school background, I took classes in real estate finance because my dad had been in that business, and learned more and more about real estate finance rather than the business of owning hotels. And when I graduated, I ended up getting a job in real estate consulting, and then just by a fluke ended up in the mortgage banking finance business, which I've been at the same firm for 38 years.
So let's take that first step after Wharton. You said you worked as a consultant. What was that like, and how did that benefit your career that you eventually ended up in?
So, some people plan, and some people plan and God laughs.
Yes.
I think you try to make a plan. I met with a 16-year-old high school student yesterday who's trying to figure out his life career at age 16. He wants to go to this school. He wants to do this. He wants to do that. He's trying to plan every step along the way. Good for him. I was trying to give him advice, and he was listening and taking notes. 16-year-old high school kid. When I was 16, I wasn't trying to plan my life at that point in time. So I think sometimes you just look around for opportunities and see where they land. Maybe you try to plan. Specifically with me, back in the year, I'm 66, so it was 43 years ago, Wharton, graduating from Wharton. They had people that would come and recruit at the school, and nobody would recruit for the West Coast. And I wanted to come back to the West Coast. I was from here. I wanted to return. So there was no recruitment opportunities through the school. So a friend of mine, actually a friend of yours too, Rob Stone, remember him?
Uh-huh.
So Rob Stone introduced me to a professor he knew from UCLA. The professor had a consulting business on the side, and I figured it was a job: real estate, finance, consulting, numbers, and I took the job, and it was a great job. I would relate that a bit to when new people come into our firm to work, and we obviously have had hundreds of new underwriters and analysts over 38 years that have come to the company, and I tell them, for the first 3 or 4 years, you're going to be chained to your desk. You're going to underwrite deals, and you're going to get a graduate degree in finance by sitting in the cubes in our office and reviewing deals and underwriting and learning the business. And I had that opportunity as a consultant out of business school to just do deals, underwrite numbers. I was not in charge. I wasn't the boss. I just reviewed stuff. Mm-hmm. And that was the opportunity I got when I graduated business school. And I really insist that our new underwriters in the firm do the same thing. They just listen and learn. Mm-hmm. And I tell people that once they're working at a good firm, they make their own opportunities by offering to do extra work, reading everything they can in the office. And if you work at the right firm, you should be able to grow your knowledge base by taking advantage of everything that firm has. Don't just stay in your own hole there.
So talk about, you said it was, I guess, kind of a fluke that you ended up with George Smith. What created the opportunity for the fluke? So
I'm happy to share that story. It's kind of fun. So I was working at this firm, consulting firm. I'd been there about a year and a half, learning a lot. The senior owners of the firm were very, very smart. I learned a lot from them. I'm still in touch with them now, 40 years after. And I was taking a class at UCLA Extension in advanced tax planning for real estate. Again, trying to expand what I knew, my knowledge, and just taking every opportunity I can to learn. And there were a couple of guys in the class, and they heard me talking because I asked a lot of questions. I guess they thought they were smart questions. And during the break, third or fourth week, they said, we're looking for someone to work at our firm. Would you like to come work at our mortgage banking firm? And I said, I love the job I've got. I'm not interested in mortgage banking. I've never heard of that. What is that? but I'm not interested. And so they left me alone. The next week at the break, they bugged me again. The third week, the fourth week, finally I said, okay, already. I'll go talk to the president of your firm and see what it's all about. So the fluke was I was in the class, I was in the right place at the right time. I had spent many years up to that point in time getting educated such that someone would say that was luck that I got that job. My answer is no, there's no such thing as luck. Luck is when opportunity meets preparation. So the opportunity was I was in a target-rich environment, a class where a lot of business people were, and preparation meant, darn, I had an MBA from Wharton in finance. I'd worked at a finance consulting company, and I'd also been in business in lower end management roles in business in the hotel field. So the luck was that, I got the job in a heartbeat.
Yeah, it seems to me there was one other thing that you were doing, and this is something I've noticed as a lifelong teacher, is when you were in a learning environment, in this case a classroom, you were actively engaged with what was going on in the classroom, as opposed to some students who will, kind of sit in the back and just they'll listen or they'll take notes or whatever, but you were asking questions, trying to, really pull out of the teacher everything that person had, to teach you.
I'll add something to that. So yes, when I'm in a class, I always sit in the front two rows. And as far as I'm concerned, the teacher and me. And some might say I ask too many questions and I talk too much, and I do. But I want to take the best advantage I can out of that. But I'm going to relate that now to when I teach a class. And I teach classes, like I said, at UCLA and USC all the time. I walk into the class. I don't teach the full class. I come in as a guest lecturer, but I walk into the class and there are always some people in the back and some people in the front. And first thing I do as a guest lecturer is I say, guys, you know what? I can't hear you in the back row. I can't see you. I want everybody to move into the front three rows. And they wonder, who is this teacher? And he's making us move our seat. But I do that. And then I was teaching a class at UCLA, a day class. And the class had about 400 in the class. And, the front of the class is filled with about 2/3. And in the back 2 rows, there were, 20 or 30 people, and the class starts and they've got their laptops open. They don't need to be open. And I said, can you please close your laptops and listen? And they said they didn't want to or something. And I said, you're here to learn from me. If you're not interested to hear the class, you can leave. And about 10 of them got up and left. And I was a little bit surprised. The instructor was very embarrassed. But, those kids in the back row are just wasting their time and wasting their lives. If they weren't interested in the class, they shouldn't have been there. They're going there just to bide their time. They're going to bide their life away like they bide their time away. And I didn't care. It's their loss.
Yeah. Too, they're in a way kind of stealing from the other students, because the teacher still has to grade their papers and all this other stuff. And if they weren't there, the teacher would have more time to spend on the students who were genuinely interested.
Well, what's more so for me is it just gives a pall of disinterest in the class. And I want everybody in the class to be interested in paying attention in those classes as well. Obviously not a class with 400, but a class with 30 or 40 or 50. I will call on the people who look like they're confused, lost, or disinterested. I will ask a question, then I'll point to somebody who looks like they're asleep and ask them a question. If they're not woken up, they're embarrassed, whatever the case might be. But that's the way I teach my classes. And somehow the teachers still continue to call me to come back. So I guess it works.
Well, having seen you in action, I can tell you that my students always loved to hear what you had to say, and they were eager to, drink in your knowledge. That's, seriously, I had many compliments about your having been at the classes that I taught.
You're very kind.
So I assume the person you interviewed with, the president of the company, was that the legendary George Smith?
It was not at the time. We were owned by Grubb and Ellis Company, and at the time we had five offices as well. And I interviewed with the president of our company, who actually came from Grubb, but I did meet George briefly. But it's kind of interesting, and I'll share. After I worked at the company for about 4 months, working for some guys there, those guys told me they were going to leave the firm and go work for a company called Bear Stearns, that's no longer around, and they wanted me to come work with them. Mm-hmm. And I said, great, fine, why not? Let me go interview, let me go learn. The company, George Smith Partners, Grubb and Ellis, George Smith Partners, didn't mean much to me. Only the guys I worked for were the guys that meant anything to me at the time. And the George Smith heard that my bosses and I were going to leave, and he invited me out to lunch, or something George did. And that was a big deal because I didn't know George, the guy whose name was on the door, who spoke at all these events. So he invited little old me out and said, I want you to come work for me. I don't want you to leave and go work for Bear Stearns and work for these guys. And that was potentially a difficult choice, because I owed my allegiance to the guys who brought me in, hired me. And working for Bear Stearns, a big New York investment bank, was a big deal. And Julie, my wife, and I talked about it. We met George Smith's wife and talked about what was a very major fork in the road for my career, and decided, rightfully so, to stay at George Smith Partners to work. George offered me a job to be an underwriter for him at the time. And so I stayed at the firm. I did not go over to Bear Stearns with the other guys, and I became quite close to George. I underwrote some of his deals, all of his deals, worked with his clients. So 8 or 10 years, I went from being just one of his team to being his number 2 on his team with him. And it's the importance of picking the right mentor. Thank goodness I made that choice. It had a huge impact in my career.
So from what I'm gathering, and this is part of your story I've never heard before. So it doesn't sound like up until that time, you even realized you were on George's radar. Why do you think he knew who you were and reached out to you in the way he did? I mean, to use the Yiddish word, no offense, but I would have thought myself the same thing. I'm kind of like a pisher at this point, right? I'm just a little guy here learning the ropes, and yet the number one guy is saying, don't go. Why do you think that was the case?
I think that's a good question. I really don't know. I can't ask George because he's passed on. But it goes to, you go to a job, you do your job right, you ask a lot of questions, you raise your hand, you offer to participate and help out. It goes with the comment I make to guys who say they want to work for a certain firm, a company. They say, my dream is to work for this company. That's where I see myself. And I say, well, get a job. They say, it's a job I want, I can't get at the company. I say, it doesn't make any difference. Get any job you can at that company. Any job, just get in the door. And once you work there, go talk to the higher up guys and say, I'm working for Mr. X, but I'd like to learn from you. Can I read some of the things you do? Can I attend some of the appointments you do, some of the meetings? Can I just learn more about the company and show yourself in the company? And when an opportunity avails itself, hopefully they'll select you. And I suppose in retrospect, that's what happened to me. I took a job with a couple of guys that weren't that great. I didn't really know it at the time. I didn't really know I wanted to work for George at the time, but it ended up that just being there on the inside and doing my job well, being smart, diligently, gave me an opportunity that when he looked around, he said, I'd rather he worked for us and work for me than leave the firm.
Yeah. During the years I spent in the Navy, there was a kind of tongue-in-cheek joke that Navy stood for never again volunteer yourself. Right? And I would get these young sailors who were not at all pleased with their professional progression. And one of the things I would say to them is, have you bought into this philosophy? I said, because if you want to advance your career in the Navy, you're going to have to step up, not wait for people to ask you, but volunteer, say, what can I do? Where can I go where I can learn more? Is there a training I can do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of people think that the military is very different than the civilian world, but in some ways they're very, very similar. And I would say that this is a way where they are very similar. The self-starters really have kind of a leg up in terms of moving their careers to the next, to the ever next level, if you will.
That's what life is all about, I think. And there are many people that are happy doing what they do and their role, and there's nothing wrong with that. And there are those who want to really be aggressive in what they do in their life. And I'm going to steal your NAVY acronym because sometimes you tell a guy, he comes in and he says, look, I've been working for you for 3 years and I'm in the same place I was 3 years. And I'm going to say to them, well, you're not in the Navy. He's going to say, what are you talking about? I'm going to say, you know what it stands for? Because if you're acting like you're in the Navy, you're going to keep your same position for a long time.
Yeah.
So very good.
Exactly.
I like that. I'm going to make use of that for sure.
Please do. No need to. No, I didn't make it up. So no need for.
I'm sure it's been around for sure.
Yeah, a long time. So at some point, George Smith, I guess, sort of separated from Grubb and Ellis, and you were instrumental in that whole
well,
process.
Somewhat, but not quite. But I'll tell you that story briefly because it's fun. So, when you work for a big firm, big company, Grubb and Ellis was a big company. Sometimes you're a very small piece of a big company. And when things happen to the company, the smaller pieces are impacted in ways that don't make sense. In our case here, in 1994, there was a slowdown in the real estate world, recession, somewhat as we're seeing now. Grubb and Ellis at that time was a fairly big company with maybe 30 offices across the whole country, and business slowed and revenue slowed, and they were trying to consolidate offices and businesses and slow down the cash loss they had. And they said, we're going to close down our freestanding mortgage brokerage division, which was us. We're going to close down the 5 offices we've got, and we're offering that all of the Grubb and George Smith, Grubb and Ellis brokers will now work in the 30 separate offices that Grubb and Ellis has. And George said, that doesn't make sense, because the magic of what we do is that we share information. Everybody was really in the main office. There were 2 or 3 people in the other offices, but we had 35 to 50 people in the main office at the time. And we said, we really need to have everybody in one office, essentially, to be successful. And they said, well, we're going to shut down the office. And George cut a deal where they said, well, if you'll take over the lease, George, we'll sell you for $1 the company. Because as far as they're concerned, what's a brokerage company worth? Nothing, because it's only the brokers staying at the firm generating income. So George said, we want to stay together. We'll pick up the lease. So I remember that we took over the lease, we took over the copy machine lease, the furniture we got for free, and he signed some documents. And next day we owned the place. We said, my gosh, how are we going to pay the overhead? Well, it ended up that we had 2 or 3 loans that were going to close in the next few weeks that Grubb and Ellis, didn't really think about, didn't care about. And so within a month after we closed, we made a bunch of fees on deals, and we put that in a reserve account, and that gave us 6 months of overhead to cover everything. And that's how we ended up buying ourselves from Grubb and Ellis. But the other part that I want to share is that George at the time was the guy. His name was on the door. He was the icon. But George said, this is a teamwork kind of a business. And he picked the 5 strongest, most active brokers in the firm. I was one of the 5, and he said, we're all going to own this firm together. And so he gave all of us 1 share, and he took 2 shares of the company. So for the guy that really was the name on the door, for him to take only twice as much as what all of the other younger guys had really speaks a lot towards the kind of guy George was, and the fact that to have a successful business, you need to share the wealth around. We didn't have much wealth at the time, but you need to share what you have around. And I've used that over my career as running the firm. George ran the firm at the start, but because I was so close to him, I administratively helped guide us with policies, procedures for letting new brokers in, for how we paid brokers, commissions, all that stuff. I set that stuff up, ran it by George. After a while, George said, Steve, whatever you want's fine. And, for 5 or 10 years, I did it behind the scenes. And then soon thereafter, I started doing it. George was not interested in really running the firm. So I did. And I served as president of the company for about 20 years or so. But I go back to what George did, which was share the ownership of the firm. So as we grew the firm, we made a point as well to make a very clear path for younger, very successful brokers to buy into the firm, to be part owners of the firm. And that allowed us to really grow the firm successfully over the years.
Mm-hmm. So, I met George, I don't know, I think a few times, over the years. And one thing that always struck me about him is his openness and really his humility. I mean, like I said a minute ago, he was legendary in many ways, and yet you would never know, he never got a big head about it. And I'm curious to have your thoughts about not just his generosity and therefore the value of generosity in a business, but what are some of the other traits that you've found over the years, or that you've learned from your mentors, George, maybe other people, that you feel are central to being successful in the business world?
Well, on the point that you raised there, Kevin, I'll share that brokers, which is what many of us on this call are, our job is to put deals together in the background. Our deal is to match people up. Nobody cares what we think. We might share briefly what we think about how to deal with something, but the most successful meetings we have is when we have the 2 principals together, we set them up, we give them a path, and we let them talk. If we sit down at a business meeting and we hardly say a thing, we've done our job well. The meeting's been good. If I have to talk a lot in a meeting, then it has not gone well. We're brokers. We're not principles in a deal, and nobody cares what we think unless they ask us, or unless we're just trying to guide them the way we want them to go, market it or sell it. Sometimes our sponsors will look at us to sell the deal for them, to pitch the deal for them, because they know we've got a lot more experience at that kind of salesmanship than they do. But besides that, no one really cares what we think. And I think George, to the point that you spoke of, Kevin, George knew that his clients were first. And we always want our clients to be first. We want our clients to feel good. Our clients have a lot at risk. And everything's about making sure they're happy. And George understood that in what we did. It was very rare that George got mad at a customer, told me he was doing something wrong. It just wasn't the way things worked.
Mm-hmm. How, so look, there's a lot of people, especially, kind of our age, they talk about, how, I want to make sure I use an accurate word, unflexible, how much young people today think very highly of themselves, how they seem to, lack the ability to look at life in a larger context. I'm curious to know your thoughts on that, number one, and number two, for those of us who, want to groom the kind of ability that you and George had, what can we do in order to become, more client focused, more willing to, be in the background?
So I think the first question is, how do older mentors, me, you, work with younger mentees and people coming up in the firms? And I think that if you don't listen to younger, successful people, your firm will fail. I think it's just as I said that we encourage younger brokers to become part owners in our firm. And recently our firm has merged with a tech firm. And the reason is because some of our younger brokers, 38-year-old, 40, 42-year-old, not so young, but younger brokers have said, the world's changing. And the older guys in their 60s don't get it. And I admit the older guys in their 60s say, we've been doing it the same way for a long time and it's worked fine. And that's what we're going to keep doing. Well, if we keep doing it that way, the younger people in their 30s and 40s are going to leave because they're saying there's a new way that things are being done. And they're not wrong. And so I think it's important for the old guys in the firm to listen to the younger partners in their firm, listen to what they have to say, because they often know what they're talking about, know what they're doing, and us older guys can learn a lot from them. It's difficult for the old guys. And frankly, if the old guys don't listen to the young guys, pretty soon they find the young guys have left. And when the old guys get older, there's no firm left. Now, with that being said, many of the young guys don't have the humility to understand that it takes a while to get successful, to learn the ropes. They listen to social media and they see people who make a big splash and are successful. They're on TikTok, they're on this, and they're making a quick buck. And that doesn't work. At least it doesn't work in the finance and the real estate world. In the social world, social media world, I can't speak to that. Apparently it does work for a while. But you really have to pay your dues in other businesses, which include real estate and finance, which is what I know about. So I think, younger people with an ego that's too big might have a hard time. Younger people that really want to learn the ropes but have good ideas are going to find they're going to have a lot of success in what they do. And like I said, I've done that. in the sense that on the one hand, I insisted that we open up our firm to younger partners. I advocated for us to merge with a tech-related type of firm that had younger partners in it. And in my own personal development world, I've got partnerships with many sponsors who have smart ideas and are younger. I've got partnerships with people in their 20s, 30s, 40s. They're very, very smart younger people out there. And if you listen to what they're saying and you watch them closely as an older, experienced guy, I think one can quickly learn and listen and determine that a younger guy, there are very, very smart younger people out there, obviously, of course. And being an older guy with financial means and experience teaming up with younger guys that have ideas and expertise can be very successful for both sides.
So, and we've got just a few minutes left. So, what does the future hold? Is there a point, for example, is there a point at which, us older guys should, step aside? I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal. I think it was in the Wall Street Journal. And I don't remember what industry it was, but they were basically saying, the old people have to step aside. They got to make room for the new blood and let us, kind of spread our wings. I know I would argue that is potentially the case in academia, where, our generation, I think, we're gonna carry it out in boxes, and academia needs to change, just like every other part of our society. So what your thoughts about that?
Well, my thought is that if a good relationship can get built between younger people and older people, a cooperative, trusting relationship, then the older people that want to continue to work until they choose not to should have a role. I think that in some businesses that's hard to do, because in some businesses there are only a certain number of, call it, job slots. In academia, there are only so many tenured professor or even associate professorship roles. Mm-hmm. In accounting firms and law firms, oftentimes they say they can't make room for the new guys unless the old guys leave, and unless they sell their shares, partnerships. And in those places, at some point in time, the older guys may have to leave even before they choose to leave. In some businesses, the older guys may not have a choice, in the sense that to stay capable of doing a job, you've got to stay up to date on things, and you have to work full time. And at some point in time, the older guys may say, you know what, I don't want to work 10 hours a day every day. I don't want to stay up to date and everything. It's just too hard. I'm ready to exit. Where in some businesses, the expertise that the gray-haired guys like you and I, you're the gray-haired, I'm the no-hair guy, that we have, that we're able to work less hours and still have a very productive relationship with younger guys. But I think that happens when the older guys respect and listen to what the younger guys have to say, knowing that they often are right and look at things differently from the way we look at them. That doesn't happen with all old guys. Many old guys think they know it, they have the right of way, and the younger guys don't know what they're talking about. And that's a recipe for failure.
Yeah, I will observe. It seems to me that, and maybe this was something you learned from your father, but to have a mentor like George. George always struck me as being absolutely respectful to people, no matter what the stage of their career they were in, and to learn under someone like that. I think one is schooled in the idea that is something you do throughout your whole life. And so now when you're at the point that we are in life, it's probably easier for you, to do that, because that's how you were treated.
It is. I think that people should always look for mentors. Mentors are not going to find you. You have to find them. And again, speaking to the crowd out there, the audience, and also people like to talk about themselves and what they do. So if you call up a guy you've got your finger on and you say, you know what, I'm not asking for a job. I'm asking for a half hour, an hour of your time to get some advice from you. Most everybody's going to find time. And if you want to benefit from that wealth of knowledge of people out there, you've got to actively reach out for it. A mentor's not going to call up a young guy and say, hey, you look like a smart guy. Come in and talk to me. Let me tell you about what you should do to improve your career. It doesn't happen that way. So the opportunities are out there. You've got to take advantage of them. We live in a wonderful world where opportunities abound.
So I can't let you go without shifting gears on you a little bit. And by the way, certainly feel free to decline to answer this. You not only have had a long, successful career, you've had a long, successful marriage. What do you think has been the key to that?
My wife's on the line. Honey, do you want to add to that? Do you want to say anything?
I don't. I want to hear you answer it.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
no.
This is really
That's
important.
fine. No, I don't mind. I think that you've got to treat your partner as an equal in everything you do. You have to always tell the truth, can never, ever lie. As in business, in home life, if you lie once and you get caught, that bond of trust is broken for life or for a long time, depending on what the situation is. You've got to treat your partner with respect. You've got to include them in major life decisions you make along the way. You've got to understand that you've got to give more than you get. You know, I heard someone say a successful marriage requires that you plan to give 60% and get 40% back. And if both of you do that, it leads to a good marriage. I think you've got to understand, and it takes a long. And by the way, many of these things I'm saying, my wife's on the line, I have not been good at this. So I learned over the years. I'm not going to claim that I've always had these thoughts. You have to know that you can't change your partner. The way they are is the way that they are, and you just have to learn to accept them. And don't worry about the small things. Only worry about the big things. Just ignore the small things, and you can't change them. And I've got a wonderful marriage with a wonderful wife who I've known. We've been married for 38 years, and I knew her for 10 years before then. So we've known each other a long time, about 10 years, 7 years, 8 years. So those are some hints that I'd share.
Julie, would you add anything to that?
What would I add to that? Yeah, marry a saint.
Well, that's not me. So does that mean you married the wrong person?
No, I'm thinking of it from your perspective.
Oh, okay.
Kevin knew what I meant.
I knew what you meant. Indeed.
Okay.
Indeed.
All right.
Oh, thank you. Well, unfortunately, the time is up. I have to tell you, I am so glad to be able to spend this time with you, Steve, and you too, Julie. You guys are just, you are just the idyllic couple. And I'm sure, look, every marriage has its things, but, from the outside, you look and you say, this is really a team that has worked together and really made a difference, not only in their own lives and the lives of your children, but in the lives of so many other people in the community in which you live and really in the world. So it's a huge treat for me to be able to have both of you here today. And I want to thank you very, very much.
And Kevin, the work that you do in these podcasts to share information and help people get insights, which hopefully benefit them. You're doing a mitzvah in the things that you do as well. And I wish you much success in everything that you do.
Thank you, Steve. It just remains for me to remind you all that my dear friend, Marie, you are still my belle, darling. Thank you all for watching. Steve, Julie, thank you for being here today. Hopefully we'll talk soon. You all have a great rest of the afternoon.
Kevin, thanks.